There was something deep and silent in the stillness of the day. A boy sat on a bench motionless, as if he were part of the wind itself. His presence, at once unusual and habitual, went unnoticed by the people around him. The distant sound of laughter and conversation was muffled by the cold breeze that dragged leaves across the ground. However, he did not seem to hear nor to care. His gaze was fixed somewhere far away beyond the visible horizon, as if he himself were lost within himself. Gabriel didn't speak. He hadn't spoken in months, maybe longer, maybe even his entire life. There was no need. Words seemed empty to him now. The world outside continued at its frantic pace, but he, inside his silent shell, was not part of it. The pain of something he had lost still kept him trapped in a place where no one could reach him. Silence was his protection, the only shield he knew. He watched the other children move about, their carefree games and the parents who accompanied them, but all of this seemed distant. Another reality, another universe. He didn't belong there, and that place didn't seem to belong to him. The air, which should have been light and full of possibilities, dragged around Gabriel with a weight that no one else felt. The sound of the city seemed to fade away as his own world grew denser, more closed. His fingers, trembling, were clenched around the edge of the bench as if holding on to something invisible, something that even he didn't know what it was anymore. His eyes, with a dull glow, focused on a non-existent point. The pain of losing someone was a shadow that followed him with every step, making everything harder, more distant. The children ran and called each other, but not him. He didn't feel the need to get closer. He felt nothing anymore except the weight of grief and loneliness. Inside his mind, words had no place. Inside his chest, his heart beat, but he no longer knew what it meant to feel. And then, in the midst of all that silence, something happened. Something Gabriel hadn't known he needed, but something he would never forget. Something so small yet so big at the same time that it would change his life forever. It was a low, almost imperceptible sound coming from a narrow alley he had never noticed before. A muffled sound, something like a sigh. He did not move, but something inside him made him turn his head. Something inside him perhaps was drawn to that sound, as if it were the echo of his own loneliness. He looked, still not knowing what he was looking for, and it was there in that moment that his eyes met those of a being who, like him, was lost in the world. It was not a child, nor an adult. It was a dog, a dirty, thin dog with sad eyes but full of silent curiosity. He did not bark, he just looked. And in that look something changed, something profound, something that Gabriel had never known existed. Gabriel didn't know what attracted him. Maybe it was the dog's gaze, so familiar and yet enigmatic, as if he understood Gabriel's loneliness more than any human being could ever understand. The dog was there like a reflection of everything he felt. It was as if, in a single glance, the animal knew that they were in the same place, in the same void. And that gaze, silent and patient, touched something in Gabriel that he no longer knew he had. He didn't like to talk about what had happened. That hurt so much. Silence, however, had never bothered him so much. It had all started with loss. His older brother Lucas had left suddenly without leaving a word, a goodbye. The accident, a fatality, a dangerous bend in the road. The overturned car, the ambulance, the pain of a phone ringing at night. Gabriel remembered perfectly the moment he saw him for the last time with a smile on his face going to school. What he didn't know, and only learned later, was that Lucas would never get there. Grief was not something he had known how to deal with. No one else did. His parents were lost in their own grief, and Gabriel had become a reflection of his own loneliness. There was no more family conversation, no more jokes, no more laughter. Everything had become quiet, dark. The world continued to revolve around him, but he was no longer a part of it. Lucas's absence was filled with a void that seemed to grow larger with each passing day. He could no longer ask Lucas for advice. He could no longer run to his room or listen to his laughter at night. The silence of his absence became oppressive. Gabriel felt as if he were in an invisible prison. He was only 13, but the weight of grief made him feel much older. How could someone so young carry such great pain? How could he move on when the world seemed to have stopped for him? School, friends, routine, it all seemed irrelevant. He didn't care anymore. He didn't want to be there, but he didn't know where to go. His parents, also lost, had drifted away. Conversations, glances, hugs, it all seemed useless. Nothing filled the void Lucas had left. Gabriel had closed himself off from the world, and the world didn't seem to understand. It was in that silence that he found that gaze. The dog, still silent, was standing a few feet away from him, its eyes fixed on Gabriel with an expression that somehow spoke more than any words could. It was as if the animal knew exactly what he was going through, as if it knew the deep pain that held him captive. And then something unexpected happened. Gabriel reached out without meaning to. It wasn't a calculated move, but something instinctive. The dog approached slowly, unhurriedly, as if waiting for a signal. When his paws touched the ground near Gabriel, an invisible current seemed to form between them. The boy touched his head, first lightly, then more firmly, as if finally allowing something or someone to touch him again. The dog, with his rough fur and sad eyes, seemed to understand that gesture more than any human could. They were connected in an inexplicable but real way. The dog didn't ask questions, didn't judge. He was simply there, and Gabriel was no longer alone. In the following days, Gabriel saw the dog everywhere, but always from a distance. The animal seemed to be in every corner of the city, but it never got too close. It was just there, watching. Somehow Gabriel felt that the dog was waiting for something he didn't yet know. The boy began to notice that wherever he went, the dog followed him with the same silent patience as before. Sometimes he would see him in the narrow streets, stopping for a moment to look at him with those melancholy eyes. Other times, the dog would be sitting in the square at a distance, but always looking at him. Gabriel tried to convince himself that he was imagining it, but it was impossible to deny the constant presence of that being. Something seemed to be calling him, like a silent presence that was part of his journey without him asking for it. One day the boy arrived at school early, one of the rare mornings he tried to stick to his routine. As he walked through the door, something made him stop. The dog was there, lying on the stairs, his paws stretched out and his eyes fixed on him. The smile that had not appeared for so long appeared briefly on his face, but then disappeared. He was curious, but he didn't know what to do. What did the dog want? What was he trying to communicate? Unsure of what was driving him, Gabriel approached, this time with more confidence. The dog did not move, but his eyes shone softly as if waiting for a response. Gabriel slowly sat down beside him without making a single sudden movement. He stood there, silent, but he sensed that something much bigger was happening, something that was beyond his comprehension. From that moment on, the dog's presence became a constant. It wasn't a commitment or a necessity. It was something much more subtle, something he couldn't explain in words. With each passing day, the dog seemed more present. There wasn't a single day that went by without him appearing in some way. He was there when Gabriel got home from school, waiting near his house, as if he was waiting for him patiently. Sometimes the dog would stay at a safe distance, but other times he would approach cautiously, as if asking if Gabriel was ready for his company. And little by little, something began to happen. Something small, but profound. When Gabriel was alone, with no one around. The dog would come closer and closer. It was as if he understood that Gabriel needed space, that he should not be pressured, but that his presence was enough. There was no need for words or gestures. Trust grew silently, almost imperceptibly. The boy began to feel that perhaps the dog was not there by chance, as if he knew what Gabriel needed more than he did. And then, one rainy day when Gabriel was alone in the room, the dog appeared. This time there was no distance, no hesitation. The animal entered through the door without any warning, as if it were already part of that space. It approached the boy with a calm look and without any fear lay down next to Gabriel. The touch of its rough fur made the boy take a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of relief. Something he didn't know he needed. At that moment, Gabriel felt for the first time in a long time that perhaps he was not so alone anymore. The dog was not saving him, nor was he healing him with something magical. He was simply there, like a silent friend who understood his pain without asking for explanations. The dog had a unique way of being present. He did not need to change anything. His presence was enough. Days passed, and Gabriel began to realize that there was something different inside him. The dog, with his calm gaze and constant presence, seemed to have the power to reveal parts of himself that he himself had hidden for so long. It wasn't a miraculous transformation, but rather something so subtle that he often found himself not knowing when it had begun. It was as if the pain was gradually dissipating, not because it had been cured, but because the space for it was being taken by something new. Something he didn't know how to name yet. Before, he had not allowed himself to feel anything. His life, like a river that had lost its course, had become a desert of emotions. The people around him seemed distant, unable to really see what he was feeling, and he, in turn, was increasingly distancing himself from them. But with the dog, it was different. He did not need to explain his pain nor justify his silence. The dog was there without asking questions, without demanding answers. He understood without words that Gabriel's healing would not come from grand gestures, but rather from the silent acceptance of who he was at that moment. There were days when Gabriel would just sit on the garden bench, his eyes lost in the distance, and the dog by his side. They didn't speak, but the silence didn't seem uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was a silence that said everything that words couldn't. The dog's company became a balm for Gabriel, as if his simple presence were able to soften the sharp edges of his loneliness. But the transformations did not come without their own conflicts. Gabriel was not quite ready to surrender to this connection. Part of him still clung to the pain as if it were all that remained of his past. He still missed Lucas, and this made him resist what the dog offered him. A new way of relating to the world, a new way of loving. There was a silent fear that by opening himself up to the dog, he was betraying the memory of his brother. At many moments, Gabriel felt confused, torn between the unconditional love that the dog offered him and the fear of forgetting what he had lost. He looked at the animal and thought about how he could hold on to it, fearing that, like other things, that love would also be fleeting, ephemeral. The dog, however, showed no signs of rushing. He remained there, more present and more patient every day. No matter how much Gabriel tried to push him away, the animal always returned as a silent reminder that what he truly needed was not outside of himself, but within. The dog was not replacing him. He was not trying to be Lucas, but he was teaching him something fundamental. That true love is not measured by time, nor by memory, but by the acceptance of what is. One day, Gabriel found himself in a rare moment of vulnerability. He was sitting at the table looking at Lucas's photo, and a thought crossed his mind. Could I ever love again? The dog, as always, was there, watching him with his gentle eyes, unhurried, without judgment. Then, without really understanding what was moving him, Gabriel reached out to stroke the animal's head. The touch was light but full of meaning. For the first time in a long time, he felt something that was not pain, nor fear, nor loneliness. It was a feeling of warmth, of belonging, of knowing that no matter how much time passed, he still had the capacity to love. The dog didn't have to do anything more than be who he was. His mere presence was transforming Gabriel in ways he couldn't put into words. The bond that was forming between them was like the building of something delicate and powerful at the same time. Gabriel didn't realize it, but he was opening up again. The process was slow, like the formation of a river that carves its own path through the earth. Every small gesture, every look shared with the dog was breaking down the barriers he had placed around his heart. And like a gentle breeze, healing began to happen. Gabriel couldn't see it right away, but little by little he noticed his steps becoming firmer, his breathing calmer. He was beginning to allow himself to live again. Not in a grand way, but in a simple way. Every little moment with his dog was a step toward a more whole, more connected life. Winter came like a silent warning, covering the world with its cold, slow mist. Gabriel felt it more than ever, as if time itself was freezing around him. He and the dog had become inseparable, and the two shared a silent but comfortable routine. Yet as much as the dog was always there, it seemed like there was something Gabriel still had to face, something he was avoiding with all his might. The pain of loss, the pain of Lucas, still haunted him, like a shadow that stretched across every corner of his life. One morning, as Gabriel was getting ready to leave, the dog, with his watchful gaze, seemed to notice something. He stared at Gabriel as if he wanted to say something, but the words were not there yet. At that moment, Gabriel felt a sense of apprehension. There was something in the air, a tension that he could not identify. When he opened the door to leave, the dog did not move. He remained sitting there, his eyes fixed on Gabriel. Something was wrong, but Gabriel could not explain what it was. It was then that suddenly the pain of the past emerged like a hurricane, bringing with it a storm of feelings that Gabriel thought he had buried. He remembered how Lucas was always by his side, in the simplest moments, but also in the most important ones. The memory hit him like a wave, and the longing he felt for his brother became something so palpable that it left him breathless. Disoriented, Gabriel went back to his routine, trying to ignore what was happening inside him. But the dog wouldn't let him get away this time. He started following Gabriel more closely, as if he was protecting him from something, but also as if he was trying to remind him of something he was trying to deny. It was as if the dog knew somewhere deep down that Gabriel needed to look at what he feared most. He needed to confront the loss of Lucas. He needed to allow himself to feel the pain so he could truly heal. One evening, during a solitary walk in the park, Gabriel found himself in front of a tree. He stopped, looking up at the cloudy sky, and then the pain became unbearable. He fell to his knees, tears falling freely without any barrier. The pain of losing his brother, the emptiness that had always accompanied him, was more than he could bear. And in that moment of despair, something amazing happened. The dog, with its silent presence, approached Gabriel and lay down beside him. There were no words, but there was a deep comfort in it. The animal was there, lying silently, just being, while Gabriel allowed himself to feel his pain without reservation. And then something changed. What had once seemed like an unbearable weight began to dissipate, like clouds slowly moving away after a storm. Gabriel, with the dog by his side, realized that the pain, as difficult as it was a part of his life, not the end of it. He understood that the loss could not be erased, but it could be lived differently. The love he felt for Lucas did not need to be buried. He could bring it into the present, into the now, and live with it, alongside the dog who, without saying a word, helped him carry that pain. In a moment of clarity, Gabriel stood up. The pain was still there, but now he accepted it instead of fighting it. He looked at the dog, his eyes shining with the simplicity and purity of understanding, and for the first time, he felt a lightness he had never known. He was no longer running from his feelings, he was learning to live with them. The dog had shown him that just as he was capable of love and pain, he was also capable of moving on. Healing did not come from denial, but from accepting everything he felt. In that moment, with the dog by his side, Gabriel made a silent promise. He would not forget Lucas, but he would stop being consumed by the pain of loss. Life still had so much to offer, and he was ready to discover it step by step, alongside the friend who had helped him find his own strength. Winter began to relent, and with it Gabriel also found a softness in his own heart. The dog remained there, a silent presence, a steady anchor in the storms of life. The days began to pass more lightly, and the park, which had previously seemed an empty and lonely place, was now filled with new colors and sounds. Gabriel began to walk more, without haste, without the weight of the pain that had previously crushed him. The dog beside him was like a reflection of his own journey, quiet, but always attentive, always present. On one of these walks, Gabriel sat under the same tree where months before grief had overcome him. Now the bench beneath the tree felt comfortable, welcoming. He looked at his dog, who lay down beside him, and took a deep breath, as if he had finally learned to breathe properly. The gentle wind made the leaves dance around them, and the sound of nature, once muffled by grief, now seemed like a familiar melody. Gabriel looked up at the sky, and for a moment he pictured Lucas. Not as a pain, but as a precious memory, a smile that still lived inside him in the small gestures of everyday life. He remembered how much he loved the way Lucas laughed, and how he had always missed him. But now, he no longer felt that sharp pain, that unbearable emptiness. He felt something deeper, more peaceful, a quiet acceptance that the love he felt for his brother would never fade. He had found a way to carry that love with him without letting it break him. The dog, with his understanding gaze, seemed to understand this change. He stood up and gave a slight nudge with his nose, as if inviting Gabriel to stand up too. Gabriel smiled, and for the first time in a long time felt a simple, genuine joy. He reached out and stroked the animal's head, which closed its eyes with a sigh of contentment. It was as if somehow the dog knew that he had accomplished his mission. He had healed something inside Gabriel, something that he himself did not know needed healing. As time went on, Gabriel became more open, more connected to others. He began to engage in small things, helping a neighbor, laughing with a friend, sharing stories about his brother with those who knew him. But most importantly, he learned to be kind to himself, to allow himself to feel happiness and sadness, and not to judge himself for it. The dog, who was still always by his side, taught him the beauty of the present moment, of quiet connection, of the simplicity of love. The park, where silence once seemed like a prison, now became a place of freedom. Gabriel felt the warmth of the sun, the freshness of the breeze, and the presence of the dog with a new perspective. He understood that life was made up of these little things, moments of pain, moments of joy, encounters and goodbyes, loves that stay and those that go. But the most important thing was that he had learned to live with all of this, without losing himself. He had found a way to move forward, to honor the past, but not to remain trapped in it. When Gabriel and the dog returned home that day, something changed. He no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted him for so long. He felt a peace, a deep acceptance of life as it was. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was his. and he was ready to live it fully with the dog always by his side, a silent reminder that love in all its forms always finds a way to heal. And so the cycle of pain and healing continued, not as an end, but as a journey that, despite the difficulties, always offered a new chance to start over. And Gabriel knew now that even in the darkest hours, love, like sunlight, would always return, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings. If this story touched your heart, just imagine how many more are still to come. Here, every bark carries a new beginning, a second chance, a brand new life. If you believe in the power of dogs to change destinies, like mine, like yours, then subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because together we'll share stories the world needs to hear and feel.